Hello, welcome back to Fred in the Shed. I hope you're all well. Got a couple of new little portable shortwave radios sent in for review by RADDY. This radio, which is the RF 760, I will feature this in a future video. There's a lot to get through on this multi-band receiver. I think, looking at the specs, this could possibly be the ultimate holiday travel shortwave radio. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and you have the bell notification on to look out for that video. But on this one, we're going to look at this radio. This is the RF 750, a tiny little shortwave receiver. Let's crack right into it then. First thing, we do have a set of written instructions. The radio is not overcomplicated, but it does have multi-function buttons. Yeah, the user manual, it's okay. It's a little bit pidgin Englished in places, but is what it is. What I do like about it though, it does show you the frequencies on the shortwave and also the weather band if you live in North America, and you can receive that. Unfortunately, we can't get the weather band here in the UK. So yeah, not a bad effort. It's not too bad. Nicely packed, of course, and then we've got the radio itself. Now, it is tiny. This is amazing. I mean, when I first opened this to charge the battery, I was just shocked how small this radio is. It looked much bigger in pictures, and there it is. And it is a really small radio. Let me just bring in this UV5R for comparison for the radio, guys. Look, you can see the UV5R. It completely swamps this tiny little RF 750 radio, and I've got to say from the start, because of its size and also the retro dial, which we'll have a closer look at in a minute, it's very much, I think, a radio for the collectors, people that like to collect shortwave radios. I think this would look nice in a collection. Personally, I think I would have liked it if it was a little bit bigger. It has got a very tiny little speaker. I mean, what is that? Just over an inch across. I'll be very interested to hear how that sounds. It is a very small speaker. So yeah, it's a little bit shocking how small the radio is. Well, I've just noticed it has one of those protective films. You can only do this once, can't you? Let's peel that off. There is something very satisfying in doing that. So there we go, that's the radio itself. Also in the box, and I think this is brilliant actually, it comes with an extendable antenna wire for the shortwave. Has a little spring thing here that I suppose if you wanted to hook this up on a high point such as a tree and whatnot. I haven't undone this obviously, but comes with a crocodile clip, that's fine, and that will just clip straight there onto the telescopic whip antenna. There is no plug unfortunately in the radio. I think it's nice they supply that, and it kind of says that they're quite serious about this radio's shortwave capabilities, so it'll be interesting to see if it lives up to that. Little lanyard strap, very much on the military theme, as is the radio. We'll have a look at that in just a close look in a second. USB-C charging lead, and then quite a nice little bag there to put everything in if you were going to use this on your travels. Right, let's have a closer look at the radio. Looks like RADDY were going for a military theme with this radio. It sort of represents maybe an army pack radio. The detailing on the lettering and type font used on the back and also the side, very much retro military style. Personally, for me, I just like the retro look of this tuning dial. When you switch it on, you do get some very fancy little lights that come across the top of the screen there, but once they settle down, you do have these two amber little tuning lights on the dial, very much like an old-fashioned tube radio. Only slight issue with those amber tuning lights, they do show through the function display, if you like, at the top of the radio. I did find that a bit confusing when I realised I thought a couple of LEDs were illuminated. Now, it does have a manual tune. It is digital, it isn't a pure analog tune, and it is very sensitive, especially when you come down to shortwave and there's no fine tuning. There are two ways of tuning the radio. You can use the manual tune, or you can use auto seek and it will just tune to the next station, or you can hold down the tune button and then the radio will go through all of the frequencies on that particular band, and it will then save them as presets. Only issue with that is once they are saved, you can't move them around. They're just set presets, and then you just tune the radio by using the up and down button. So it is kind of like digital tune, but it does have this rather nice analog tuning dial. Let's have a quick look at the features of the radio. 4 different bands of tuning. It has WB, this is the North American weather band. Unfortunately, we can't pick this up in the UK, but that tunes from 162.4 to 162.550 megahertz, and that's broken down into 7 bands. Also has a weather alert function. Next is medium wave. 2 different step rates on medium wave. This radio covers 9 and also 10 kilohertz, so that's good for the USA and also European markets. Next comes shortwave. The whole broadcast band is covered, 5.70 up to 17.9 megahertz, and that's broken down into 7 bands. Just AM shortwave, unfortunately. There's no SSB, no sideband on this radio. Also, there's no air band and there is no CB band. Radio will also act as a Bluetooth speaker from your mobile device. Has a TF card slot for MP3 playback. Will take up to a maximum of 256 gigabytes on a TF card. Has equalization settings. There are 6 different presets for equalization, which will play back on the MP3. Not quite sure how that works with such a tiny little speaker, but is there. Also has a sleep timer. You can set this from 10 to 70 minutes and the radio will automatically turn off. Comes supplied with a BL5C. This is what I would call the Nokia battery. These are very cheap all over eBay and Amazon, so easy to get yourself a spare if you were going on a long trip. The one supplied is a 1000 mAh at 3.7 volts. Above the tuning frequency drum, we do have multi-LED readouts here. It's not the easiest radio to use. It does take a little bit perhaps of getting used to, referring back to the instruction manual. All of these are controlled by the 6 buttons here on top of the radio. A lot of these are also multi-function, multi-press. Personally, they're fine, but I think they would have been nice if they'd have had some painting on the indentations. They are a little bit hard to see sometimes. Doesn't make the radio particularly easy to use. Next to the buttons, we then have the volume control. I'm not really sure what they were going for here, whether this is something to do with the military theme, but it's almost like this propeller design. I'm not all that keen on it, to be honest. I mean, it does work, but it's a little bit awkward. It is numbered around the outside, but again, you can't really see that. I think they would have done better just to have an ordinary knob. I think that's a little bit of an overkill. Not particularly keen on that. Another thing that also I'm not particularly keen on is the switch here, which you would use to turn the radio from radio to Bluetooth and also MP3 player. It's okay, but it just feels to me quite flimsy, and it's not all that precise. Again, I think it lets the radio down a little bit. I'm not over keen about that, but in fairness, it does work and it works quite well. Moving on to the back of the radio, got these military decals, so they look quite nice, I suppose. Then above here we've got the TF card slot. It's quite nice that when you push the card in, it does stay in all of the way, it goes quite flush. And then above that we have the USB-C slot for charging the battery. On top of the radio we have an extendable telescopic whip antenna. Not a bad size for such a small radio. I'd say it's about 50 centimetres thereabouts. I'm not sure if this has a built-in ferrite bar for the AM side. It might rely on the antenna itself. It's okay, but the only thing I think they missed out on, it would have been nice if that would have had a hinge, an elbow joint there, so you could have bent it around for the FM reception. But I guess it is what it is. And then finally on the front, which I've missed, it does have this button here. This changes the functions of the LED lights. For example, at the moment we have a battery indicator there saying that we've got a full battery. Then you can switch on the VU meters. It's a bit of a gimmick, I suppose, but it does give it some brightness. and then you can switch all of the lights off. One thing I have found is that, as I say, unfortunately you can't switch the dial lights off, and they do show through the indicator apertures, if you like, so that can be a little bit confusing. Going to test the sound quality now. I'm not expecting much out of a 1-inch speaker. This does have 6 presets on an EQ setting, and we'll try those at the end, but okay, as long as it doesn't distort. So we switch it straight onto TF mode and it will start playing straight away.
SD card mode.
I tell you what, that doesn't sound half bad. There's even a tiny bit of bass there. Well, I've got to admit, I'm impressed by that. That is such a tiny little speaker, and it sounds really quite clear. And there is even a little small bit of bass. I don't think there's any reflex port on the radio itself. I don't know how they've done it. I don't know how they've obviously used a very good quality speaker for its size. But yeah, that is quite impressive. We're just going to run through some of those EQ settings. I didn't think they'd do any difference, but having listened to that, that actually might make some difference. Right, here we go. A bit more treble on that one. Yeah, there is a slight difference there. I mean, it's not brilliant, but that goes really loud. That's actually got enough volume to fill a small room, so that is impressive. First, that's a Fred and Shed thumbs up, definitely. I don't know how they've done that. They've got obviously a good speaker in there, and that certainly produces a very clear and loud sound. So yeah, good as an MP3 player. We'll just quickly try the Bluetooth mode, and then we'll get on to the radio itself. Okay, let's just see how quickly my phone picks up the Bluetooth pairing. And there you go. I don't know, you probably can't see that, but it's come up straight away. Click on that.
Connected.
We're connected, so let's just play a little bit of an audio book that I was listening to.
Probably in the middle of the night, would take the time to put his shovel down, take the gum out of his mouth, wrap it in its foil, which he had to take out of his pocket, and then drop it. I think if he'd been chewing gum, he would have just spit it.
Yeah, that works absolutely fine. Okay, let's get on to the meat and veg of the radio review. Let's test it as a radio. Like I say, there's 2 ways of tuning it. There's the manual way of tuning with the tuning drum, or also there's the auto search and auto presets. It's a bit of a shame that once you've got the presets in the radio, you then can't delete them and change the order, just the way it is. So I've just on FM. Oh, I'm on the weather band now. Unfortunately, we don't get that in the UK, so we're just going to change on to FM. It does have a stereo indicator, and I suppose it would be in stereo if the radio had an earphone socket, because that's one thing I've just realised the radio doesn't have, does it? It doesn't have an earphone socket, and that's really, really peculiar. I can't understand why they didn't include that. It's a portable radio, especially on shortwave. I like to listen with headphones. It's a little bit odd, but anyway. Okay, let's see if we get on FM on the manual tune, and I'll do the auto tune.
From 7:30 live here on Radio 3, the home of the proms. Well, music by Mozart next this afternoon.
I always thought of you as a song.
So that sounds quite good, actually. I can't play too much of that because of copyright. I've turned on the little VU meters if you like that sort of thing. I'm going to try the shortwave side of the radio out now. Let me just zoom in a little bit. So as you see on the dial here, this is broken down into 7 different bands from 5.70 megahertz all the way up to 1790. It's fairly clear. There is a digital version of this radio which I think would make shortwave tuning a little easier, but then you would lose the retro look of the radio, and I think that's probably its best selling point. So we'll go through in a second using just a telescopic whip antenna. Ideally, really, you should use the supplied long wire. I'll undo that indoors, there's not really much point. We'll just use the telescopic whip antenna and we'll see what it picks up, and then I'll use the auto tuning, and that might be the quickest and easiest way to tune on shortwave. But anyway, let's find a band that's active and see what we get. I'm going to try band 6 around about 15 megs, as it's probably the best in the afternoon. Let's try the manual tuning then. See what we get.
Ülkede sürücü, himaye edici ve ileriye götürücü bireylerinin büyük bir oranda
Filmlerinde, mezunlarında hani
in response to the killing of an officer by a gunman allegedly linked to drug trafficking last month. 600 police officers deployed to reinforce policing into neighborhoods on the outskirts.
Okay, so we've got about 2 or 3 channels there. I'll just put it onto the auto scan and see if it brings in anything else. So we're just going into scan mode here, and I've just realised it's going to go right across all of the 7 bands on the shortwave side. So it's going to take a little bit of time, so I'll speed things up and we'll see what happens at the end. Okay, it seems to have finished. That took about a minute, maybe a minute and 20 seconds. Let's see what we've picked up.
Friday than it was at the opening on Monday, having inched a bit more than about a quarter of 1%. The country's top economic standing.
其实我 medium-sized enterprises
将科学合理把握利率水平 We will keep the interest rate at a reasonable level. We will not.
Okay, that sort of worked. It picked up a lot of very, very faint signals and very strange stations. There's no attenuator as well. So, yeah, it kind of worked on shortwave, but I think you're better off tuning manually on shortwave, to be honest. It works quite well, actually.
bugün öğrencilerin ilgisi nasıl?
öğrencilerin ilgisi yüksek her zaman.
It sounds quite nice.
Sınavlarımıza başvurular hep yüksek bütün alanlara. Bu bizi memnun ediyor. Bir yandan da sanatın.
So yeah, I definitely think that the manual tune works better.
He's really struggled in the last couple of runs, but that's a massive back.
So conclusion time for this little RADDY 750 radio. Well, as I said at the beginning of the video, I think this is one for the collector. Dare I say it, that kind of blokes say it, but it's quite cute. No, it is. It's retro styling. I especially like the tuning drum there. It is quite unique, and it is quite attractive in its styling. It is exceptionally small. I personally would have liked to have seen it perhaps a little bit bigger. In saying that, although it's got a very small speaker, credit to the speaker there. The sound quality it produces is really, really sharp and clear, and on MP3 it's quite lively as well. Criticisms? Yeah, I've got a few. Firstly, it hasn't got an earphone jack. I just find that, you know, really, really odd. And I say a couple of the controls, the tuning's okay, that's quite nice and smooth, but that volume control, the way that little recessed, it works, but I don't know why they just didn't put a tuning knob on that. And likewise, the selection switch there, it just feels a little bit cheap and nasty. A little bit gimmicky with the lights as well, but I mean the best thing is that you can switch them completely off. They do get a little bit annoying as a VU meter. I think when I first got this radio out of the box, I thought it was going to be very gimmicky, but it's not. It's more than a gimmick. It does work, especially on shortwave. That telescopic whip antenna in the shack brought in a good selection of shortwave stations. It's also good that they supply you with this 9.5 foot single core wire, which will improve the shortwave reception even more. If you're interested in making a purchase of this little RADDY RF 750, there is a Fred in the Shed link below in the description. RADDY's checkout system is a little bit odd. We get charged 20% VAT into the UK. They are looking at that in the future to try and incorporate that into the price so that doesn't add on in the checkout. However, they have promised me with the link they supplied, they will scrub off the normal postage and packaging, which is like $9.99 into the UK. So the total price for the radio should be 36 UK pounds. If you do get to checkout and the post and packaging is still on there, just drop me a comment on this video and I'll get back to them and we'll sort out. But £36, it's a fair price for a little novelty radio. Okay, I think that's the end of this review. The next one that I've got coming up is for this other little RADDY radio. This is the RF 760, which I think is probably the ultimate travel holiday radio. This is absolutely packed with features, so look out for that. But as for now, as always, thank you for sticking with the review. There's the thumbs up from Fred in the Shed for your view time. If you get a second, just hit me a thumb up down below before you shoot off. I would appreciate that. And yeah, as always, look after each other, take care, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers, guys.